Thanks, Lawrence. Thanks, Eva, for the introduction at the beginning. And also thanks, Lydia, for these amazing examples from nature. The question is actually how to transform these principles from nature into some applicable frameworks. So how to put these principles into practice, into guidelines that can be measurable for architects, engineers, planners, more in general, sustainability consultants. So how to make this transformation real into the built environment. This is basically what we are working on. So hello from Bolzano, South Tyrol, the north of Italy. This is where we are based. This is not exactly the view from our window in the office, but it's not so far from where we are. Yeah, so this is basically the European office, is the European partner of the International Living Future Institute. ILFI is based in Seattle, in the United States, and we are basically working to promote their programs across Europe. And today I will be speaking about the ILFI frameworks more in general, but also Living Building Challenge, with a lot of points of contact on what Lydia presented just before. Living Building Challenge is basically recognized as the most ambitious sustainability, or better to say, regenerative sustainability program for the built environment available globally. And this is actually a visionary path to a regenerative future. So it's really a vision of a different future. Let me really briefly introduce myself. I have a background as building engineer. I worked for construction firms for about 20 years. And then in 2008, also thanks, let's say, to the economical and financial crisis, I changed my approach. I discovered sustainability in the built environment. I discovered innovation, better to say sustainable innovation for the built environment. And then around 2012, I discovered the Living Building Challenge. I've been impressed about the robustness and the integrity of the program. And I said to myself, this is the way we should go towards, and I would say about 10 years after, 9-10 years after, I'm more than convinced that this is absolutely the way we should go, and the practice we should be, let's say, doing in our everyday professional activity. The mission of ILFI, which is also the mission of Living Future Europe, is actually to provoke a transformation in the communities, reaching communities that are socially just, culturally rich, and ecologically restorative, or better to say regenerative. Please notice that socially just is at the beginning, so also the equity and social justice in the built environment is absolutely a topic, and there cannot be sustainability without social equity and social justice. And I think we need to abandon this word sustainability sooner or later. I think this is something we already discussed in the past with you, with Bruno and the other persons at Wiebe. So what does really sustainability mean? It's basically giving back to the environment what we have taken off, and we are not yet at that point. So if we consider, for instance, very high performing buildings, they are still impacting somehow on the environment. They are consuming a bit of energy, they are consuming water, they are consuming resources. So they are taking back from the nature more than what are given to the nature itself. So we aren't still, let's say, at this neutral point of balance between the negative and positive impact. And we do envision a total different scenario. So instead of thinking to do less bad with our buildings, we know that they are really impacting a lot on the global environment. Let me say 40% in CO2 emissions. We know these numbers. So why don't we subvert this paradigm? Well, we change this paradigm, thinking on doing more good with buildings, with our activities as professionals. So what does good look like? This is the answer we are trying to answer with our projects. Like, for instance, this is the Van Dusen Visitor Center in Vancouver. Van Dusen is a botanical garden close to the Vancouver city. It's an amazing place. And if Lydia was speaking about biomimicry, see, for instance, the shape of this roof that is inspired by a local white orchid. This is a local flower, very typical. There is a green roof on the top. Animals can walk and run onto this green roof overnight because it's really in contact with the gardens. So it's full of harmony and it's full of inspiration, natural light, natural ventilation, and so forth and so on. So we do imagine a world of living buildings. We do imagine a living future in reconnection with nature, in harmony with the nature. And to do this, the LFI, the Institute, around 2006, started setting up a portfolio of frameworks, and the Living Building Channel is the most famous of all. But it's first a philosophy at the beginning, and then is also an advocacy tool, so a tool that we can use to promote a different mindset in the built environment. And only in the end is a certification. It is also certification assessed by a third-party auditing process. So you can also assess and certify your buildings, and as this certification is valid internationally. We nowadays have more than 750 registered projects globally on all the different areas in the world, from different climate zones, from Canada to New Zealand, different parts of the world. So it's also a demonstration that this type of buildings, it's absolutely doable, depending on the different climate zones, the different geographical areas, tradition, culture, techniques, local techniques, and so forth and so on. Some highlights that is I would like to pinpoint. First of all, it's an holistic framework. So including equity, already mentioned, including beauty. This was the first framework to introduce beauty as a mandatory concept to get the final certification or to drive the design process. It's not the idea of measuring beauty, but it's the recommendation to designers to include elements of beauty, which is very much related and linked to biophilia, into the design process. It was the first framework globally to talk about health and happiness as two intertwined concepts within the indoor environment. So how these buildings are shaped, how the materials are selected, how the indoor quality, the environmental quality is managed. This is something that's totally and directly impact on human health. So this is another important point. It's not a prescriptive checklist, so you don't have to imagine like you have to tick boxes. They are very, let's say, simple to understand, but clearly robust and challenging from a technical perspective, principles that we are asked to implement in order to get the final certification. Moreover, it's maybe the only international recognized standard for sustainability in the built environment based on real performances. So we do ask for at least 12 months of operations monitoring to track data. We ask the design teams, we ask the managers, the facility managers to track data in order to demonstrate that that building, their building, is actually performing as it has been designed. And if you think all of the other sustainability standards, they're based on theoretical models. So how the building should work, but not exactly how the building works in reality. And you know, there are differences about 20, 30% in performances when it comes to real operations. Is it something that we can afford? Is it something that is acceptable? Also, not only from an environmental perspective, but also from a financial perspective. So again, it's a tool for advocacy. It's a philosophy and a tool for advocacy to break barriers. We need to break the paradigms. We need to shift the paradigms. We need to raise the bar and set up a different discussion. And moreover, it's a framework and a set of frameworks that is going to be developed continuously, also thanks to the collaboration and the dialogue between all the project teams working on different projects globally. So it's also thanks to this type of collaboration that the framework evolves. Just let me spend a few seconds on the different programs in our portfolio. So we have third-party verified certification, like Living Building Challenge, I already mentioned. We have a similar framework 4 companies manufacturing products, which is called the Living Product Challenge. Same structure, 7 petals, 20 imperatives. How the companies are basically using resources, relying on renewable sources, and so forth and so on, in producing their products. It can be flooring, it can be furniture, it can be a lamp, whatever. And then there is Living Community Challenge, which is basically the transfer of the Living Building Challenge principles to a district scale. So those are really the lively and let's say living communities that we are able to design and to build. We have also some certification addressing the energy and the carbon performance of the buildings. More specifically, the zero carbon certification is absolutely what we are seeing is developing very fast, because the carbon neutrality is maybe our biggest challenge and our biggest option nowadays. The European Union committed to become carbon neutral by 2050. You absolutely read about all the news from big corporations and globally that are committed to become carbon neutral. What does it mean? It means that they need to address their facilities, to address their built environment, their building stock, to make it really carbon neutral. This zero carbon certification addresses the carbon emissions on one side of materials in order to reduce them as much as possible. On the other side, the operational energy of a building, which has to be provided through renewable sources on site and or off site, making a life cycle assessment calculation of the building impact, and then offsetting the final number resulting from this calculation through international recognized standard for CO2 offsetting, which means that at the end of the day, you are able to achieve a fully carbon neutral building. Zero energy is quite very similar. It addresses only the energy perspective. In this case, you are required to cover all of the energy demand in your building with the renewable sources on site. So these are basically the buildings of the future, but there are already available technologies on the market. So it's something that we are able to make it absolutely today. Core is a sort of entry level of a Living Building Challenge. It's 10 out of the 20 imperatives of Living Building Challenge. And then we have these so-called transparency labels, like for instance, Declare. Declare is an ingredient label for building products, for furniture products, where the manufacturer displays all the chemical ingredients in the product, and also displays if there are some chemical ingredients that are harmful or not, which are included in the so-called red list. And this is clearly an important act of transparency towards the market. This is something we are noticing. It's also taking off in Europe as well. We nowadays have more than 160 products manufactured in Europe under this label. Then we have a transparency label for company, which is just a sort of corporate social responsibility label, the same concept of Declare. So our company is performing under the social equity, the social justice requirements, how they are basically communicating to the market in a transparent way what they are doing. And then we have a Reveal, which is a sort of energy label for buildings, which basically says how much energy the building is consuming related to its gross total surface. So basically, it's a sort of performance indicator under an energy perspective for a building. So the metaphor behind this framework is actually the metaphor of a flower. So, and again, reconnecting to what Lydia was presenting before, are we able to conceive a building that is working in harmony with nature perfectly in a full efficient way as a flower does, and also which is ultimately beautiful? A flower is totally self-sufficient. It gets the solar rays, it gets the water from the rain, it recycles basically all of these waste materials locally. The same for a tree. So are we able to conceive this type of buildings? We have the technologies, we have the practices to do it nowadays. And moreover, this type of building has an added value that is really, say, convincing for the market as well. It's able to build trust with the stakeholders, and stakeholders might be the real estate developers, might be the owners, might be the manager of the building, might be the absolutely the users. And this is something that works also to explain a different type of building to all the people involved in the process. Moreover, it's again a way to demonstrate the real performance, the actual performance of a building. This is very much important. Moreover, if we are really thinking to address the built environment once and forever in order to, let's say, struggle against the climate emergency in a more efficient way. And you know that, again, the built environment is very much responsible. The certification is provided through a third-party auditing process. And again, clearly, you need to achieve some very high performances in order to realize this type of buildings. For instance, this is the Hawaii Preparatory Academy Energy Lab in the Hawaii Island, which is basically consuming 80% energy less than a similar building. And this is another Living Building Challenge certified project. You will have industry recognition because the Living Building Challenge certified projects are considered beautiful. There is an annual award provided by the American Institute of Architects, and Living Building Challenge certified projects are always among the top 10 list of the best architectural buildings in the US or even globally. So again, for instance, this is Heron Hall. It's a house on Bainbridge Island in front of Seattle. This is the house of our founder, Jason McLennan. It's a Living Building Challenge certified single family house. It's totally self-sufficient, totally reliant on renewable sources. It has basically a positive impact on the environment. And this is something that works also as a demonstrator. And they make financial sense too. So this is our headquarters in Seattle. The Bullitt Center, which is still considered to be the greenest commercial office building in the world. It's a 6-story building, totally self-sufficient, producing more energy that they consumes, closing the water cycle. So they are using and managing all of the water, gray, black water locally, getting the rain, harvesting the rain. They are producing energy through a photovoltaic array on the rooftop and a geothermal system. They have been able to produce around 14% more energy from than what they consume from the very first year the construction work has been completed, so in 2013. And this makes financial sense as well, because they are selling their surplus of energy to the grid. They produce more energy, not for a mistake in the design calculation. They simply underestimate the collaboration of tenants, because at the end of the day, tenants have been involved from the beginning of the occupation in some, let's say, agreements, rent agreements between the property and themselves, in order to be a part of the save, to basically paying the bills, their bills, depending on the savings of the buildings. And this is something that's been, let's say, underestimated by the designers, but at the end of the day, they've been able to provoke and create huge energy savings with an efficient operations and management of the building itself. So again, it's a cash machine if you see this initiative from a financial perspective. Again, I already mentioned Living Building Challenge is not touching only the energy perspective, but also the health of people living in the building itself, the inclusion, the universal access. So it's absolutely a different type of building. For instance, this is the Ken Data building at the Georgia Tech University in Atlanta, which has been certified recently. This is another Bullitt Center. So you see the photovoltaic array on the rooftop. This is another beautiful, huge building producing more energy that it consumes. It's an example that this type of building is absolutely feasible and makes sense under different perspective. Living Building Challenge is basically divided in 2 types of certification. So you can get the full certification if you are compliant with all the 20 imperatives that are all mandatory. Or there is a sort of intermediate step, let's say. You can achieve the 10 imperatives of the core certification, and then achieving the remaining imperatives to complete either the water, energy, or material spatial, which are considered very important for the certification. It's applicable to 4 different typologies of building: for a new building, for existing building to renovate, for interior, also small retail spaces, and also for landscape and infrastructure. For instance, this landscape, this park is the park outside the Bullitt Center in Seattle. This is another interesting example. Basically, the property agreed with the municipality of Seattle to recover an existing decade land that was basically full of cars and other, let's say, polluting situation. And then basically they recovered this piece of land and they gave this land back to the city, and now it is a community. It is a place for community. I already mentioned the protocol is divided into 7 petals. You remember the metaphor of the flower. Here are the 7 petals: place, water, energy, something that you already know. But again, equity, beauty, health and happiness, maybe these are new concepts for sustainability standards for the built environment. The 7 imperatives are, sorry, the 7 petals are divided into 20 imperatives. As the words say, they are all mandatory. And you see, they are quite simple principles. So ecology of place, urban agriculture. So you are required to set up a list of these different principles and imperatives, and in order to demonstrate that the building is compliant with the framework and the certification. Very briefly about these petals: place as the intent to recover the place where the building is situated. So it's also an through your building design process, you have also the opportunity to recover the existing land outside your project. Then there are other concepts, for instance, like urban agriculture. So you are, for each type and each Living Building Challenge certified building, you are required to set up a piece of land, a piece of the area of your project for urban agriculture. So to produce food locally, this is something that makes sense from different perspectives: reducing the CO2 emissions, acquiring a sort of self-sufficiency. Think, for instance, when there are some climate disasters happening, it's also a resilience imperative, resilience requirement we are including in certification. So these type of buildings are also resilient, and you know, these climate disasters are happening more and more frequently also in Europe, in our countries. So this is something absolutely we need to address. Habitat exchange has to do with the protection of land. So clearly you are exploiting a piece of land for your project. We are requiring you to protect a similar amount of land through an international recognized standard in another part of the world. So in order to preserve the land and reduce the soil and the territory exploitation. Human scale living has to do clearly with the sustainable mobility. Clearly, biking is encouraged, sustainable mobility is encouraged, electric cars, public transportation, sharing vehicle opportunities, all of these concepts are clearly encouraged. Water has to do clearly with respecting the natural cycle of water, so reducing the consumption of water as much as possible. And then with the imperative number 6, net positive water, really closing the full circle, the loop of the natural water, let's say, consumption. So harvesting the rainwater for irrigation or for the usage you need for your building, recycling, filtering the gray water, black water, using composting toilets in order to reduce as much as possible the amount of water needed for flushing the toilet. All of this type of technology that are already available for the market. One concept is interesting, in my opinion, this fit for purpose concept of water. So you don't need to have use potable water to irrigate plants. You don't need potable water to flush in the toilets. But this is still our normal practice. If we think about this practice, we clearly can imagine that is something that doesn't make sense anymore. And this is something we can absolutely overcome. Energy perspective is very similar. So again, reducing the energy consumption as much as possible, and then covering the energy demand with renewable sources. And on the other side, with the net positive carbon requirement, also addressing the carbon emission of the project. And in the end, achieving a carbon neutrality in order to have a building that is not impacting, or basically is positively impacting under this perspective. And this makes sense from many perspectives. This is totally in line with the European directives on energy efficiency, with the carbon neutrality goals, and so forth and so on. And moreover, we are really moving to get rid of the fossil fuels once and forever. So the no combustion is allowed in living building challenge certified projects. Is basically, we are envisioning a different situation, a different culture, and different environment in the end. Health and happiness is a piece addressing the indoor environmental quality, the air quality, natural lighting, access to nature, the reduction of the VOC emissions from materials. A lot of topics that I'm sure you already know, but it's also very important because, you know, we are living more nowadays with the pandemics, more than 90% of our daily time within building, within enclosed spaces, if we are studying, if we are living, if we are working. So that's why how these enclosed spaces are designed and managed. This is very important. The materials PITAL is maybe one of the most important of the full living building challenge certification, because it addresses the chemistry, the responsible usage of materials, the responsible extraction of resources, the chemical ingredients, the red list. We have this list of more than 20 chemical families that we banned. So if you want to certify a building with Living Building Challenge, you are not allowed to use formaldehyde, chromium-6, lead, mercury, asbestos, even PVC. So all these substances that are considered harmful under different regulations globally and in Europe as well are to be banned in order to have a living building challenge certified building. Responsible sourcing, local sourcing, net positive waste, which means that the whole construction site process and also the management of the building has to be performed in order to recycle as much as possible the waste materials. This is a very circular economy concept at the end of the day. Equity, already mentioned. Universal access, clearly no architectural barriers. This is something that is quite normal also for our regulations in Europe. Inclusion, the just label. So this is a concept that is absolutely needed to be implemented in the construction sector as well, where we are seeing a lot of, let's say, injustice and disequity, let's say, in many situations. Starting from the construction sites, the relationship with workers, and so forth and so on. And in the end, the PITAL of beauty is actually promoting the biophilic approach. Lydia already explained a quite really comprehensive way about biomimicry. Biomimicry is part of the biophilia. So we basically introduced all of the 6 elements and 72 attributes from the Stephen Keller biophilia theory into the Living Building Challenge certification. So we are asking the design teams to use these elements of nature, of reconnection with nature, into the design process, and ultimately in order to make these buildings more beautiful and livable. And then there is a huge part also about education, inspiration. What is also important, we are asking all the design teams to produce materials at the end of the process, at the end of the project. We have a website. You can find all of the case studies of the certified buildings explained. You can filter per PITAL in order to understand which strategies have been implemented to achieve those results. I think this is a very interesting let's say, educational opportunity as well. And again, we need to share the information. We need to make this different type of buildings feasible. And again, these are buildings that can be implemented and achieved in every part of the world. Though you have really different examples here. I already mentioned the Living Bullet Center up in the left part of the picture. In the lower part of the picture in the center, this is the new Google Office complex in London, which is the first zero carbon certified project in the world. This project on the right is in Australia. The one in the middle and the left part is the Etsy headquarters in Brooklyn in New York City. Again, this has been certified with the Living Building Challenge, with the specific attention on biophilia. They simply discovered that if you are inviting or you are welcoming customers into a biophilic place, they like the place. They are buying more products from your services, for instance. So this is something that is also important from a financial perspective. How to achieve the certification, how to run the certification process is quite easy. First of all, you need to become a member of ILFI, and then with the membership, you can basically have access to all our resources. You can do whatever you want. You can register a project. You can register a product with Declare. You can register a company with Just, and basically you will be assisted with the help of our technical team in the US. We have different teams for each one of our certification programs, so you can receive actually a good help, a good assistance from them. And then again, the certification will come after 12 months of operation monitor after the beginning of the occupancy. So what else? We find a lot of resources on the website. They are generally available for free. So I encourage you to download these materials. You can download the protocols, or you can download the other resources. We have also some technical reports, some research studies. So we produce research reports in collaboration with other institutions on the water management, on the energy management, on the materials issue, on the financial performances of the building. So you have really a number of resources. Again, I'm encouraging you to become a Living Future member. Please write to us. I will share our contacts in the end. With the membership, you can get access to all the resources online. I would highlight also the Living Future accreditation program, which is also important. It's basically an accreditation program for Living Future professionals. Basically, those are the persons that are needed to be part of the design team from the very beginning in order to drive all the team and all the process towards the final certification. Moreover, for the Living Building Challenge and the core certification, this figure is also needed if you want to get the final certification. We have a learning path online of 20 so-called foundational curriculum credits. Then you can add other 16 credits from your training, individual training, other activities like reading, participating into projects, volunteer activities, and so forth and so on. And with these 36 credits, you are able to become an LFA. We are, let's say, still at the beginning in Europe with this process. So this is also a competitive, let me say, opportunity for you to be recognized in the market as the professional accredited with the most ambitious sustainability standards globally. And I know you, Lawrence and Bruno, and all of you at Viva are doing many things on this and many education opportunities. I also thank for this opportunity today. With the members, with the Living Future accreditation, you can also become an ambassador. Ambassador is basically a person that is presenting on Living Building Challenge and ILFI programs recurringly. Let's say we ask to present at least 4 times a year through a very simple agreement with us. We have also a publishing company, which is called Ecotone. Believe me, I have many of these books. They are very well done. They are done generally by architects, so they're also very beautiful display with super interesting concepts. So basically, they are explaining the different case studies, and you can find information about the strategies, the technologies, the approaches used. It's something that's absolutely interesting. You will find the books both in the printed version and the ebook version on our website. And I'm going to conclude to encourage you also to follow us as Living Future Europe. Clearly, we are working across Europe to promote this regenerative thinking, this regenerative design approach, the Living Building Challenge and the other ILFI programs. We have some social media, so don't be shy. Absolutely, we encourage you to follow us on this. And let's begin. We can begin right now. And thanks a lot for your interest. And here you can find our address. This is where we are based in the Bolzano in South Tyrol. This is the Neutech Park. NO is an acronym for Nature of Innovation. It's a park, a previous industrial area that has been, they were producing aluminium between the two world wars here in Italy, and now it has become a sort of innovation center where there are startups, tech companies, and we are based there together with other, let's say, like-minded people. It's a place to share ideas and information, to start projects, and we are also surrounded by nature, and this is also very important. And thanks again, bedankt.